The silence within these crumbling walls has always been my refuge. Here, in the abandoned maintenance shed of Riverside Sanitarium, I find the only moments where the weight on my chest lessens and the fog in my mind clears. Tonight is no different. Marcus, the trembling voice cuts through the darkness like a blade. Right here, I respond, my voice emerging from somewhere deep within. I force myself back to consciousness, like rising from the depths of a dark lake. My eyes flutter open to find Danny's nervous silhouette pressed against the far wall. Your jacket's unzipped, he whispers, still shaking. I check my watch, 1:15 a.m. Time to begin. I strike a match, the small flame dancing like a miniature star in my dilated pupils. After a moment, I light the old oil lamp and raise it high. The warm glow pushes back the shadows, and I can see the fear reflected in Danny's wide eyes. The kid's barely 18, but he's reliable. His fear keeps him sharp, keeps him alive. Only a fool wouldn't fear Riverside Sanitarium. 3 sharp knocks echo from the loading dock door. Danny jumps, then looks at me sheepishly. I simply watch him without judgment. Time to earn our keep, I mutter. Carlos handles the outside work, collecting fees, sneaking groups past the security guards. The guards know what we do here, but they look the other way. The charade of sneaking past them adds excitement for our paying customers. 3 knocks means 3 groups tonight, each waiting at different entrance points around the sprawling complex. Which entrance is tonight? I ask Danny as we push through the double doors into the maze of corridors that snake through the old sanitarium. The hallways stretch endlessly, sound bouncing off the cracked tiles. 3rd week of the month, Danny recites. So Carlos should be using the north entrance lobby, Ward C through the broken door, and the old cafeteria loading dock. Good. You have the keys. Got them right here. Why oil lamps? Flashlights fail. Batteries die. Oil burns steady. The rules. Stay together, no exceptions. Stick to main corridors and common areas. Some restricted rooms can be opened by request, but never the isolation ward on the 3rd floor. And never any room marked with a red X. The kid learns fast. Soon he'll be running these tours solo. You're ready, I tell him. Tonight, you lead. I'll just observe. Danny's face shows equal parts pride and terror, but he nods. The corridor leads to our first intersection. Without words, we both drop to one knee, make the sign of the cross, then rise and walk straight through. We never look left or right at intersections. Never. Carlos looked once 3 years ago. He still won't set foot inside the sanitarium. He was lucky to get out with his sanity. We walk in silence, listening to our footsteps and the echo of other footsteps that seem to follow behind us. Soon we reach the north entrance. Danny pulls out his key, knocks twice on the door, unlocks it, and lets it swing open slowly. The outer doors remain unlocked, but the inner entrance is always secured. These waiting rooms serve as collection points for our guests. Smaller groups are harder to detect by the night security, or by the other things that roam these halls. For flashlight beams blind us as the door opens. Danny and I are used to it. Our guests are nervous after waiting in the dark. Lights down, please, Danny says quietly. Leave your flashlights on the table and take the lanterns. Hold all questions until we've collected everyone, I add. Danny winces. He forgot that line. Please save questions until we have the full group, he echoes. Good. He won't forget again. We move through the central corridor, quickly collecting the 2nd group from Ward C, then heading upstairs to gather the 3rd party from the cafeteria loading dock. The recreational therapy room sits in the southeast corner. Normally it's a quick route, but with guests in tow, we take the safer path along the outer hallways. Until everyone's together and briefed on the rules, it's best to avoid intersections or worse, the central courtyard. Halfway down the north corridor, Danny stops abruptly and tilts his head. I freeze as well, closing my eyes. If he hears something, speaking over it would be unwise. Our guests sense this and fall silent. There it is, a soft scratching sound, like fingernails on glass. In all my years running these tours, I'd never heard that particular noise. And believe me, I've heard plenty of others. Chilly night, Danny says to no one in particular. It's the first normal volume words spoken tonight, and the tour group flinches as though he'd shouted. I give him an approving nod. He remembered make noise, but don't acknowledge the sound directly. Cardinal rule. Never engage with anything that might be listening. Some spirits are harmless, even helpful. Others hunger for interaction, for acknowledgement, for a way back to the world of the living. The scratching continues. Sounds like glass. Danny observes, confirming my own thoughts. The sunroom. I sigh. Carlos mixed up the locations again. Danny's frustration shows, but relief washes over his face. We turn the group around and backtrack. It's a short walk to the sunroom. 2 figures can be seen through the heavy glass doors. They must have seen our shapes pass by earlier and grown nervous, unsure if we were the tour group or something else entirely. But they knocked as instructed when we missed their pickup. Not everyone does. Danny unlocks the doors and awkward smiles are exchanged. Lanterns are distributed, and Danny begins his orientation speech. He covers intersection protocols, unexplained sounds, eye contact rules, and the various guidelines we've developed over the years. I study tonight's guests while Danny speaks. Most come in groups and tend to stick together. The groups also cluster by which entrance they used, having had time to bond while waiting in the dark. Tonight's crowd seems typical. The lobby group has 3 friends from college. Ward C brought a young couple and an older woman who might be the man's mother. The sunroom had the largest party, a group of coworkers on some kind of team-building exercise. Everyone signed waivers, assuming Carlos handled that part correctly, but I make a mental note to watch the older woman. We've had medical emergencies before. As Danny finishes his briefing, I raise my lantern and start deeper into the labyrinth. Danny follows, and our guests fall into line behind him. Riverside Sanitarium opened in 1894. Danny begins, his voice just above a whisper, but carrying clearly through the corridor. Originally built as a tuberculosis hospital by Dr. Elena Riverside, who believed fresh air and natural light could cure the disease. We lead the group away from the outer hallways and deeper into the long-abandoned interior corridors. Dr. Riverside was progressive for her time, treating patients regardless of their social status or ability to pay. But when tuberculosis treatments improved and the hospital's purpose changed, darker practices began. I stop at an intersection, drop to one knee, cross myself, then wait for everyone to follow suit before proceeding through. By the 1920s, Riverside had become a psychiatric facility. The new administration believed in experimental treatments, hydrotherapy, insulin shock therapy, and eventually procedures we now recognize as torture. As I navigate the familiar paths of Riverside, I slip into autopilot and retreat inward. Danny's handling the guests well, and this initial section is usually quiet. I let my mind drift. They keep staring at me, Danny whispers. I snap back to attention and look at him. His gaze is fixed on the group of coworkers. We're standing in an observation room overlooking the East Day room. This spot always provides paranormal activity, and tonight's no exception. A rocking chair moves slowly back and forth near the windows, though no air moves in the sealed room. Danny reaches out to stop one of the college students from waving at the chair. The young woman gives him an irritated look but lowers her hand. Waving acknowledges the entity, invites interaction. She should know better. I glance at the coworkers. As I watch, they turn from the window to study Danny and me, then look back at the day room. Several wear small, nervous smiles. They're scared. I whisper to Danny. The smiles are just nerves. Keep watching them, but don't worry. If anyone seems overwhelmed, let me know. Danny visibly relaxes, but something bothers me. While I'd been zoned out during the first part of the tour, I'd noticed an unusual lack of activity. The beginning is typically quiet, but never this quiet. There's usually a door slamming, glass breaking, or soft crying echoing through the halls. Tonight had been silent until we reached the observation room. Too silent. I shake my head. There's no such thing as too silent in these halls. Focus, I remind myself. Tunnel vision kills. I've seen both guests and guides lost because someone focused too intently on one thing and missed something else. Not happening tonight. I scan the co-workers again. They're still watching Danny and me closely, mimicking our movements and postures. Nervous but attentive. The older woman looks skeptical but healthy. No reason to cut the tour short. After checking on the college students, I make eye contact with Danny and nod. He nods back. The tour continues. The basement levels, that's where the real activity happens. A few rooms upstairs have red X marks banning entry, but down below nearly every door is marked. The basement is where the experimental treatments occurred, where people suffered, died, where the most dangerous spirits linger. 7 entrances lead to the basement, but we only use one. It's located at the center of Riverside, just beside the doors to the original chapel. Danny starts moving the group again, and I take position at the rear. As Dr. Riverside's successors expanded the facility, they kept the chapel at its heart. Danny continues. Some believe they were religious and wanted patients to have a place for prayer and reflection. Others think they wanted somewhere nearby to beg forgiveness for the atrocities they committed in the basement below. I watch the group cross themselves in unison before the next intersection. One of the college students, a young man, glances right as he crosses. He jerks his head back quickly, either startled or trying to hide his curiosity. Eyes forward, I whisper. The boy's face reddens and his shoulders hunch. Good. Embarrassment and fear will keep him from looking again. As I cross the intersection, the temperature plummets. My pulse quickens, but I force my pace to remain steady. Do not engage. The words echo in my skull as I fight every instinct screaming at me to run. Cold. A voice breathes in my ear. I feel its presence press against the light from my lantern, stretching the glow unnaturally down the hallway. I maintain my pace and pass through the intersection. The crushing presence fades to a distant whisper. No one else in the tour group reacts. They probably didn't hear it, but the hair on my neck stands on end. Is it following us? Did the spirit attach itself to me, or to the boy who looked? I make a mental note to watch him carefully. Danny continues his narrative, oblivious to what just happened. The treatments at Riverside grew increasingly extreme over the decades. Ice water baths that lasted hours, steam chambers that reached dangerous temperatures, electroshock therapy without anesthesia, experimental surgeries that left patients permanently damaged. We cross another intersection. I can't tell if the presence is still with us or if this growing unease comes from approaching the chapel. Between patient-on-staff violence and the implementation of these brutal treatments, Riverside saw numerous deaths. Patients committed suicide. Others simply disappeared. Rumors persist that some orderlies ran a black market, selling patients rope, razor blades, and poison for the right price. Ahead, Danny rounds the final corner leading to the basement. The group disappears around the bend one by one. Against my better judgment, I cast a quick glance over my shoulder as they vanish from sight. A young woman in a hospital gown stands at the last intersection. Burn marks on her temples and dried blood around her eyes mark her as an electroshock victim. I force myself to look through her as though she doesn't exist. I count to 3, then turn and follow the group around the corner. Every alarm in my head goes off. Something is wrong. Seriously wrong. First, Danny and the tour group are already 50 yards down the corridor toward the stairwell. I'd only paused for seconds, yet somehow they're far ahead. Second, and far more disturbing, the great doors to the chapel stand wide open. These doors are always locked. Always. We check them before every tour. I personally verified they were secured before meeting Danny tonight. There's no way they could be open unless... Third, Danny continues toward the basement entrance as though nothing's wrong. His path will take him directly past the open chapel doors, and he shows no sign of stopping. Do not engage. The words pound through my mind like a mantra. I can't shout, can't risk the noise, can't risk waking what lurks in the chapel. I sprint forward. Risky, but I see no alternative. The tour group is my responsibility. I have to reach them. The shadows on the walls writhe and twist, disturbed by my sudden movement. Light from my lantern creates seizure-inducing patterns as it bounces with my unsteady gait. Even as I run, I know I won't make it in time. I watch in horror as Danny reaches the chapel entrance and walks past without a glance. The tour group follows. First the college students, then the older woman and the couple. Each seems to shiver as they pass but keeps moving. Don't they see? How could they miss the open doors? Did Danny see and instruct them to keep their eyes forward like at the intersections? The group is nearly clear. Just a few more people. The co-workers approach the chapel. But instead of passing by, they stop. They turn, not just their heads but their entire bodies, facing the open doorway. I scream as I run, but no sound emerges. I'm sprinting at full speed, but the shadows stretching across the walls now stretch the walls themselves, elongating the hallway and slowing my progress. One of the co-workers reaches into his jacket. When his hand emerges, it holds a syringe. He waves, signaling to someone inside the chapel. The second man blocks my view momentarily, then charges into the room. I skid to a halt as shadows rush past me on the walls. The first man is visible again, but he no longer looks like an office worker. His business attire has been replaced by stained surgical scrubs. He walks purposefully through the chapel doors. Then the screaming begins. Against every instinct, I step up to the chapel doorway. It's a massacre. 3 figures in white coats lie motionless on the floor, their uniforms splattered with dark blood. 2 men in surgical scrubs are there as well, one being strangled by a patient in a hospital gown while screaming in a foreign language, the other lying dead with his own syringe protruding from his neck. Marcus! Danny's voice cuts through my vision. I jump as Danny speaks, tearing my attention from the chapel carnage to find him looking at me with concern. The tour group stands behind him, complete and unharmed. How? I start, not knowing what to ask. Danny holds up a hand to quiet the group as he scans the hallway. The sound of foreign screaming echoes from somewhere nearby. Danny and every tour member flinch and cover their ears. My head snaps back to the chapel doors. They're closed, locked. I reach out and test the chain. It doesn't budge. Danny examines the doors, clearly troubled. The co-workers. I look past Danny and scan the faces of our group. The office workers aren't there. We're missing several people. Or rather, we were always missing them. The co-workers weren't tourists at all. They were doctors. Dead doctors. Spirits continuing their work in death as they had in life. Observing, studying, and when necessary, treating patients. Tourist, patient, spirit, they made no distinction. We were lucky. Very lucky. From Danny's pale face, I can see he realizes this too. Tour's over, Danny manages. There are protests from the group, but Danny silences them quickly. We reach the maintenance shed without incident. Carlos waits for us. Short tour, Carlos observes. He can see the strain on Danny's face. Knows something happened. He doesn't ask. Doesn't want to know. The sunroom. I begin, but Danny cuts me off. The sunroom is compromised, he tells Carlos. Carlos's expression sours. He does a quick head count, then escorts our guests out of the sanitarium. Carlos didn't mix up the locations, Danny says quietly once we're alone. His voice has the hollow tone of someone whose parachute failed. I don't answer. I stare past him. The co-workers. He trails off. I shake my head and begin swaying gently. I'll understand if you want out. Danny interrupts, his voice distant. We're good. We're all good. Good. I repeat, still staring past him. Staring at the feet that sway gently behind his shoulder. They look familiar. The left shoe is properly tied. The right lace hangs loose, undone. They look like my shoes. Danny looks hard at me, then glances over his shoulder to see what I'm watching. He inhales sharply and turns back to me. See you next tour, Marcus, he says quickly, heading for the door. I try to respond, but my swollen tongue blocks the words. My neck aches where the bruises and rope burns still sting. I reach toward the swaying feet below me, desperately wanting to tie that loose lace. Forever unable to do so, the door closes. I'm left in darkness, left to hang, to sway, to wait. Marcus. Danny's voice is barely a whisper. The words emerge from somewhere deep in my chest. Right here,